You. All right, Christopher Norman, please come on up. Just for the public, we have Christopher Norman, the Executive Director of the Metro Atlanta Land Bank Authority, with his annual report. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me. It's been about a year and a day, I think, since I was last here before for the committee. So it's always a good chance to come back and kind of bring you up to speed on what we've been up to during that period of time. So I want to kind of walk you through just kind of a full, kind of a 360 overview of what has the land bank been up to over this year, and kind of give you a sense of kind of where we're leading. So we just go to the next slide. So really just want to kind of topically go through a few things, speak to you about, so what's the portfolio look like? What do we have? And then also speak about some of the transactional things we've done, as well as the operational, and then talk about some other elements of that. So first thing, jumping to the portfolio. So basically property exists in the land bank primarily three different ways. We have fee simple property that's under control of the land bank, which means we own it unimpeded outright. We also have a land bank and depository program that we created where we hold property for partners such as nonprofits and some of the city subsidiaries as well. And then also you're familiar with the demolition lien abatement project that we're also undergoing, and those properties come to the land bank as well, and they're held until they're put back and forth to productive use. Right now, based on the tax assessor, we've kind of estimated it's about, almost about $13.6 million worth of value in those properties. So it's a fairly sizable chunk of real estate that's managed by the land bank. How is it partitioned? This chart shows you kind of how it's broken down. So the land bank includes those things. I talked about the stuff we own outright, as well as some of the properties under the demolition lien program. And then these are some of the partners we land bank property with. Well, they land bank property with us. With our Future Fund, Police Foundation, you see Invest Atlanta. We actually manage their properties that they hold. And then also ANDB has a few properties with us. And so land banking, just kind of give you a sense, what does that mean? When we bank for other people, we give them a period of time, which we say, you can hold property with a land bank for up to 5 years. In that period of time, we have expectations for you to get your financing together, your development plans together, all these other types of things, in exchange for producing a certain type of product, which gets back to the affordability we've been talking about. So it's not just to bank property just for the sake of doing it. We expect to have some type of outcome when we release the property to them. And we put strings on them, which include ability to even snatch that property back if they don't do what they've done. So just want to kind of give you a sense of where we stand with the portfolio. And doing this also, clearly one thing we want to do is be good partners in the community, so we maintain our property regularly, twice a month. Twice a week would be outstanding, but twice a month. And it shows you that, it takes money to do this. So we spent almost $170,000 just on property maintenance over the last 12 months. There's almost 750 service acts that performed of that. And of course, since we're not the city and we're not the county, we have private insurance. So we do have private insurance on our property that we hold as well. So it just kind of gives us a sense of scale of the portfolio we currently work with. So let's translate this into transactions. What does this mean? This one project right here, Conley Road, just want to chat with you about this one. This is one that's been ongoing for a while, but it's an example of things we need to get involved in. This came to us a while back, and we extinguished some delinquent taxes on this project in exchange for a developer at that time who was going to convert it. It was in bad shape. They were going to bring it back online. That kind of lingered for a while, and frankly, it went along further than it should have. But basically, after they failed to complete the project, we were able to. It actually deteriorated into bad shape. Where there were a couple of murders on the property. There was mold and all this other kind of stuff. It was barely occupied. So we basically had legal requirements in our development agreement with them. So when we extinguish taxes for a party, we actually enter development agreements. So we say, if we give you this benefit, we expect something from you. And one of the things was we had a reverter right, which meant we had the right to revert that title, that property, away from you to us. And so we waved that at them and said, well, guess what? If you don't finish your development or sell it to somebody else, we will just take this property back and you lose all your investment. So therefore, they found another developer. Falcon Georgia Investments is a subsidiary out of a group out of New Jersey. They came in, and they've been working on that. This is 440 units of housing. that they're basically working on. It's all privately funded. Split, and basically it was 3 developments they pushed into one. Kind of give you a sense of this before. This is kind of what it looked like before. You can see, you can see it's in bad repair in all this. And so over the years, they're working on it. They finished half of it. So this is now what it looks like. We got these pictures when we did a site visit. You can see now we have landscape and you have all this other kind of stuff. This is the south portion. The northern portion, they expect to be done coming up towards the end of this year. So this is an example, again, of how we can use public-private partnerships and some of the tools we have to get some of these properties back online. And so this is exciting to have this hopefully completely done by the end of the year. They fell victim to the COVID and the supply chain. I think at one point it was taking them a year just to get appliances and stuff delivered for a project this big. But a lot of that's kind of has eased out now. So that's just an example of that. Permanent affordability pilot. This is something we did. Everybody's been talking about how do you have long-term affordability, go past the one turn. And so the Atlanta Land Trust, the community land trust model itself, basically by design, is for long-term affordability. And so we came up with a permanent pricing model. So anybody who wants to do community land trust property, basically, the maximum will allow you the maximum price will be 35% of the market value for these properties we may hold, if that is your model. So right now, the Atlanta Land Trust is the most robust model doing that, and so we entered into an MOU with them. We've designated 14 properties around the Beltline footprint for them to basically work on. We decided that 25% would be their threshold. So to date, they've actually delivered one unit, Eugenia, they sold it for $100,000, and that's in the Grove Park neighborhood, which is phenomenal for that area. And that was an interesting journey for that property. We actually got that property from the United States Attorney via a money laundering case that they seized the property and gave it to us. And so we've turned it into a new life for new property. Since then, they've actually picked up 5 additional properties, and 3 are set to close this week, well, within the next couple of weeks. So that brings them up to 8. So these are the 14 properties that we've identified for Atlanta Land Trust. Unfortunately, 3 of them are in the west side, and they're part of the EPA West Side Cleanup Project that you may have heard of with the slag that they're working through. So those unfortunately going to be, it might be a year or 2 before those get ready, but those will be also designated for the land trust. So that gives you a sense of that. Abatement project. This is where, of course, the portfolio of liens that exist on the books, the city is foreclosed on those. As those get foreclosed on, they come into the possession of the land bank. And so these properties have come in. We've actually, since they were delinquent, derelict, a lot of them sitting there, some of them haven't paid taxes, in addition to not having been redeveloped. So we've actually already extinguished $1.1 million of delinquent taxes on these properties because that's one of the powers of the land bank. And I do point out that the consent of the school board is required to do that action, so we've received that as well. So we're all working together on this. And so those are primarily multifamilies. All the multifamilies will be, and let me explain the 151. Sounds like a big number, but what a lot of people did back in several years ago, they took apartment complexes and turned them into condos, and then they sold individual units. And so they basically took one parcel, and now they split it into maybe 20 or 30. So what the legal team is having to do is basically knit all this stuff back together. And so it sounds like, so the footprint you may have 30 parcels on a former apartment complex. And so when you think about the 150, it represents about 7 apartment complexes. So now we're about to go into phase 2, which is going to be more single-family properties. And so our attorneys have been, a team has been engaged with the Atlanta Law Department to work on those for us. And then hopefully, as those come to fruition, we're going to issue an RFQ to identify as developers to basically put those, basically it's just land, turn those parcels into properties. And hopefully our target is the end of this year, 3rd or 4th quarter of this year for that. The Fulton County District Attorney, I've mentioned the U.S. Attorney. We've also had conversations with the District Attorney about properties they bring into possession. They brought a property on 730 Deal that was forfeited. It was a drug house. We are now working with the Atlanta Police Foundation to turn that into a police officer housing. And so we have done that with them before in several other occasions. And so again, this is just an example of how we work with different agencies to find opportunities to bring housing to the forefront. Westside Future Fund, I think we're all familiar with that organization. We just entered into an arrangement with them for a 5-year land banking agreement. They've just transferred about 33 properties over to us. Those will be held for up to 5 years while they basically do their process of turning those into active units. And that's a combination of single family, multifamily. So that's ongoing right now. One thing about this, we made an agreement that they will allow them to continue to maintain their own property while we own it. But they keep us in the loop in terms of everything that's happening on the properties because they basically keep it in good order. So that's another partnership that we do. Surplus conveyance. So the city, speaking about, what is the city doing, looking inwardly, strike force, all these sorts of types of things. We've identified there are some surplus properties that may be usable for housing. So 2 organizations work with the city and the land bank. So Grove Park Foundation and Atlanta Land Trust. We work with them to basically receive the property from the city. These have been subsequently conveyed to these partners for them to turn it into housing. And so these are the parcels, and you can see the locations and addresses. So again, and then lastly, under this transactional slide, the land bank received share from Marshall D portfolios about 20 years ago. There's basically just damaged title that came in. There were over 600 of these types of parcels. About 340 or so have been 440 have actually been disposed of since this period of time. We determined we have about 160 to remain. Title is not clear. So what we actually, and work with you and the council and your members, your colleagues, authorized was $400,000 to basically clear the title and make this clean property that we can now put towards housing. We've engaged counsel. The first 40 are in process. So we had to do quiet title, we had to clean it all up, and then hopefully these will be ready. It takes 6 to 9 months. You have to go through the full court proceedings and all of this. So our timeline is to have these properties available also. So in addition to the demo lien RFQs and all of that, we're going to probably have 30 to 40 properties we're going to put out for developers at the end of this year also. So this will be another opportunity to bring properties to the market, and we will have affordability requirements on those, and we'll be happy to talk between now and then, talk to City Council and make sure that we're in alignment in terms of, what do we really want out of these parcels? Because these are basically, we can determine what can be built on these parcels. So that kind of gives you a sense of the transactional things we've been involved in. So what has Land Bank been doing operationally? We did our first comp study for the organization. We had never done one. And we brought in, and we just want to make sure everything is competitive. Just like everybody else, you've heard some of the people present earlier about retaining staff and being competitive. So we did find that we were out of step a little bit with the market, and so we've made some one-time adjustments to salaries across the board, and I think everybody's in good shape right now. And so now going forward, I think we'll just kind of be in a normal pace of merit increases and all of that. So that's one thing we did. Our records. We also are digitizing everything we have. So all of our records are being currently digitized. It's 3 phases. 2 phases are done. We're in the last phase. And so hopefully by the next, really April, May, all the historical records of the land bank will be digitized. And therefore, we have easy access to property deeds, tax documents, bank records, all these other types of things, which is a big thing. Otherwise, before, we would have to go dig through files and go find property records and all of that. And we deal with a lot of property, and we've been in business for a long period of time, so we've actually gone all the way back to everything we could put our hands on. And this is part of this whole project. So that's a big shot in the arm for just being organized. We have basically been moved to adopt a different schedule as well, just like everybody else. So we merged. We went to a 3-2 work schedule, just letting everybody know. We do have our offices. We are there definitely Tuesday through Thursday. Monday, Friday are optional to come in. I'm often there anyway. But just to let people know, if you walk up to the office on a Monday and Friday and you knock and nobody comes, That's because we are remote working, but we're all available via, obviously, email and phone and all that. And still happy to arrange in-person meetings if needed. People are interested in what is happening in Atlanta. And so this is just an example of things we've been asked to participate in. We've been on several webinars with national organizations. We attended the Chicago Conference for Reclaiming Vacant Properties, which is a national conference about vacant property. We presented there. I've been asked to go down. So also, one of my hats is I'm the president of the Georgia Association of Land Banks. So there are 25 land banks in the state. And so we actually went to the GIC training retreat. Some of you may be familiar with that, and actually often do the panel on land banking. So we've done that. Interviewed on Small Business Network. One of our staff members was actually interviewed as an emerging leader of color in land banking, so she was involved in that. And then recently I testified before the New York City Council because they're actually looking at creating a land bank. They don't have one in the city. So everybody wants to see what's happening in Atlanta, which is a good thing. And a majority, if you're curious about what was said or what was done, a lot of this stuff is on our website. And we do push out things like this on our social media, so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, just for historical purposes. In addition, like I said, I'm president of the Land Bank Association. As we emerged from COVID, we all decided to have a summit in Macon. This is the agenda. You can't really read it off the side here, but you can probably see a little better there. But it was a full-fledged deal. You see, it was a wide range of people that came from across the state, and this is a full assembly down in Macon. That was back in June of last year. And lastly, in terms of governance, so the board is made up of 7 individuals. 4 are appointed by the City of Atlanta, 3 are appointed by Fulton County. You'll see the highlighted marks here. So the ones in green, those are City of Atlanta appointees. And those 3 are expiring basically now. We've already been in contact with administration. They're working through proposing reappointments for 2 and then finding a replacement for 1 who does not want to continue their service. So just look forward to those coming to council for action. And then the ones in yellow, those are Fulton County's appointees. With Fulton County's, what they do is they actually have all of their appointees expire on the same day. So in August of this year, basically all of their appointees will sunset. So they're aware of this, and so they'll be looking to either reappoint these persons or find new people to do that. So that kind of gives you a broad kind of drive-by of the land bank, what we've been up to. You know, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create affordable and market housing. We're trying to eliminate blight that exists in the community and neighborhood revitalization. And we realize, we've talked earlier, controlling land is imperative to solving some of these problems. So that's just kind of a general overview of the land bank. And lastly, as I close out, we are the Fulton Atlanta Land Bank, so any city in the county is actually eligible to participate to join. So the city of South Fulton is actually interested in joining. They've actually just approved a resolution to petition for membership. So we're looking to come back to you and seek approval of the city of South Fulton coming into the organization. So, and that's it. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have from these slides or anything else that might be on your mind.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norman. Before I turn the floor over to colleagues, just a couple of quick questions. One, what percentage of the land bank's properties have improvements on top of them versus just completely vacant?
I would say at this point, more than 80% are vacant. There was a time when a lot of the properties had improvements on them, but a lot of this now is just is vacant land. Just from the origin, the origin of where it's coming from. If it's Demolines is gone, other properties that we've got from other arenas is a lot of the structures are gone at this point.
And the reason why I ask is I imagine properties with improvements I'm assuming puts a dent in your maintenance and operating budget because there's a lot of other considerations around rats and mildew and mold that you have to keep remediating and addressing and that sort of thing. So. Well,
fortunately for those types of things, those aren't as much of an issue because they're not occupied. So for us, we basically have the structures enclosed, but we do have intrusion, and we've had fires, we've had other things that have resulted in actually us having to demolish properties because they've gotten so bad from those types of decay. So it is hard to maintain a boarded structure for an extended period of time with no activity.
Okay.
So, yes.
And the reason why I asked, I guess this other question will lead to why I asked the previous question, but does the land bank, y'all hold the title or the deed for those properties?
We do.
And so the reason why I asked the first question is I get a lot of code complaints and issues with properties all across my district, and never once have I had an issue where the Metro Land Bank has come up as being a negligent property owner, because several of the properties that we deal with are publicly owned, and we will slap those public agencies on the wrist to make sure they clean up their properties, but never has been the Atlanta Land Bank. So I just appreciate y'all's commitment to the maintenance side and to continue to make sure that even though these properties aren't vacant or occupied, they're not negatively impacting our community. So it's a very leading way to give you some kudos.
Well, I appreciate that. We do make it an effort to. Our posture is we want to be a good citizen. If we're abating problems, we don't want to contribute to the problems.
Absolutely. Well, my last question before I turn it over to Councilman Lewis, there's been an active discussion happening right now with regards to property owners either losing their home or losing access to their homes because there's a tax lien or a solid waste fees lien, and those liens get bought up by investors from the county, and by the time that property goes up for auction, we don't really have a strong budget to be able to compete with some of these private investors to get those properties back into the hands of Atlanta families. Has there been any conversation with the county or with any other stakeholders to interject maybe the land bank into that process so that we can acquire those liens early enough to where we have the land in a governmental or quasi-governmental agency so that we don't have to worry about the investors doing the speculation and all that sort of stuff. But can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So there are a few things that are happening in that scenario. So if you're a private owner that has that and you're going delinquent on your taxes, one, I will say that if you do call the tax commissioner, he will oftentimes try to work out a payment plan with you, because if you think of what the investors are doing, because actually you can pay your taxes via credit card now as well. So what these investors are basically doing, they are your credit card, except their interest rate and their fees are going to be much more than if you found another way to do that. So just by the mere fact of transferring and somebody selling your tax lien for 1 year, you have not lost control of your property just yet. There's a time period. A year has to go by, and you have all these other types of things in their legal processes that basically then turn into their statutory fees, 20%, and then a 10%. So it does start to kind of stack, and that's what happens to people that say, fine, it's been a year and a half, I really don't want to lose my property, but now I not only have to pay the past due, but now I have to pay this person 20%, and then I have to pay another 10%, and then it becomes kind of out of their league, right? So if there were a situation where there was an ability to either assist them in paying that tax before it got that far gone, that would help them to stay in that. Or if there's a payment plan put in place by the tax commission to help them keep from getting to the point that is possible. When they actually go to tax sale, the land bank can basically bid on those properties just like anybody else, right? And so there could be a situation where the land bank could be a bidder for it. But of course, if you're bidding for it, there are two ways we can bid for property. We can say we'll bid for it as a credit bid because we're the land bank. We don't have to pay the taxes. We can just pay the fees. But then, or we could bid up like anybody else, but then we have to pay cash. So we have to be capitalized to compete with private investors to basically have that tax position. But in theory, if we were to acquire, let's say, all the liens that went for sale, we bought them all, then we could turn around and say, okay, now we're going to negotiate with you on how you're going to pay this stuff off. And we're a little more patient, probably, than investors on the street. But we have not been, but of course, you have to be capitalized to do those types of things, so that could be a multi-million-dollar exercise. And that has happened in other states where they've done that. But again, that's just to kind of get into the very creative aspect of how you basically inject a public agency into the tax realm. And so there are several steps before it gets to that final step, which is you lose your property. And so I just want to make sure that that is clear as well, that it becomes tough, it becomes troublesome, but once you've lost it and they sell it, and you have a tax deed, and then there is a final step to that expires, but after that final period expires, you basically have lost your property at that point in time. So I do just want to make sure that people understand that there are iterations to that whole thing.
And I do want to correct myself with regards to the tax lien portion of that. I was thinking more of, even though I mentioned, someone losing their home, I know we have a lot of heirs property issues where folks don't live in a state,
Right.
aren't connected to the city in any way, may not even realize that the property is in their name or in their family's name. And those end up getting snatched up by investors as well when we have this housing shortage, and seeing where there potentially is opportunity for the land bank to play a role in acquiring that so that we can get it back into the hands of, as one of my colleagues likes to call it, indigenous Atlantans versus investors that don't necessarily have community's heart and mind and interest.
Yeah, or even conveying if it's partial interest, donate their interest to us, and can we do quiet title like we're doing with these other sheriff and marshal deeds to basically gain control, consolidate control of that property, and then we might be able to have that, right? So, but we do have a donation program. We do have doors are open for anybody that's having these types of issues to talk to us about, if you live in Houston and you just don't want this property and you've inherited it, you don't know what to do, call us and we might be able to work out something like that. There was a property across from the old Kennedy Middle School, and there was a couple. The mother had the property. She gave her interest to the wife. The mother passed, the wife passed, then the widowed husband ended up with the property. He lived in Dallas. He didn't want to deal with the property. He ended up donating it to us, right? And then we were able to turn that around. So there are situations we can have these conversations and just see if there's a possibility.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. As you see, the work you're doing has to be shown across the country, which is why they're asking you to come to other cities, and which is why you're leading the state association. So I appreciate you for your service on that.
Sure.
Also, Conley Road, to work with your office and to work with the developers at Conley Road is to see a public-private partnership working the right way. To see you hold them accountable on the north end, and to see the South be open, and to see a true workforce housing, to see the affordability component be at what's the AMI at Conley Road, if you don't?
Well, this is what we call a natural affordable housing type deal. I think the units are about $1,000 a month, or $11,100 for, I think they're two, and there'll be some 3 bedrooms on the north side. So that's kind of where they are. There's not a hard cap on that project because of just the natural affordability of it. Because there was also no ongoing mechanism for us to enforce anything, because it's none of our money is in it. It's all private money.
So you mean to tell me a private investor came in and was able to do some real affordability to where folks are getting 2 and 3 bedroom apartments? No, really ain't no 1 bedroom apartments out there. These is for families, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments where folks are paying less than $1,200-$1,300 a month.
Yes, and it's a private developer in doing that. And I would point out this as far as the neighborhoods, the South River Gardens Association, you probably know well. I mean, they were very vocal from day one. Ms. Nichols, Shirley Nichols is my buddy, because, she's been all involved. So all the negotiations colored all of this stuff, and even to them having input in the name of the apartments.
I know they even named the apartments, and
yes.
they're trying to make sure that their fingerprints all over the entire community, which is how I know that district, which is where Pool Creek is, Gilbert Garden, which I mentioned a little earlier, they're okay with affordable and that opponent coming for real.
Right.
Not that other kind of affordable stuff we've been talking about in Atlanta, where they want 80% of what you make per month. Right. So I appreciate you for your service and for holding our hand throughout that process, because you led us on this. My question to you is, as soon as my computer comes back on, my question to you is, when's the last time that you did an audit on the amount of organizations that have held properties through the land bank for 5 years?
So it's been a limited number. So I could probably give you a quick. So we started the program in 2010. So it was the first one in the country, actually. And I'll give you some history about that and kind of explain that. So when the crash occurred, a lot of the nonprofits here, the CDC's nonprofits, their business model included development of housing. So going up to the crash, you can remember all the prices were going so high, so fast, they couldn't keep up with their taxes. And we knew their work was so important that we wanted them to not lose their portfolios. So we created a land banking program to basically, we held their property tax exempt for a couple of years to say, okay, we'll pump the brakes on that. Then the crash occurred, and then when the crash occurred, the other part of their model failed, which was then they created operational revenue by selling that property. Well, guess what happened in 2010, 2011? Couldn't get a bank loan, you couldn't get a construction loan, so they couldn't build anything. So then they started losing properties. And so we basically, at one point, we probably held every CDC at that time probably had property in the land bank. So if you think of, Pittsburgh Community Improvement Association, SUMEC, RRC at the time, just kind of go down the list of all the CARES, which is now FCS. All these different organizations had their property in the land bank under this program. A lot of them have rolled it out. We even have the Annie Casey Foundation, all of this stuff. So I say there's a finite group of developers, because actually to land bank with us, you have to be a nonprofit, first of all. And so there are no for-profits. The only for-profit one was a joint venture with Columbia and SUMEC. And they did a scattered site LIHTC deal in the Summit Hill Mechanicsville neighborhood, right? But everybody else has been a nonprofit. And then also, again, we've held property for Invest Atlanta, which we still currently do. And we've actually done some for the city of Atlanta, held some of their property short term. So I can get you that information specifically, but it's going to be contained in those types of organizations. But the names will probably sound familiar when I get it to you.
I appreciate you, and I asked that question because I'm thinking a lot about the Fort McPherson deal, and I know some of the folks that we worked with they ran up against that deadline, and all of a sudden the entire thing has changed, and what the outlook will be has changed. So I would hope that we are watching folks at that deadline so we can actually take care of them. I appreciate you again for coming today. I appreciate you for your work, and continue to stay on the developer's head. I love what y'all doing. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Councilmember Waits.
Thank you so much. I had a question for you.
Yes.
What is the process for any nonprofits that are looking for space or access to donated buildings who may be eligible for providing services to community? What is that process?
Well, it's a common question. So we don't have any buildings. So we really don't have any means for obtaining title to commercial buildings primarily. So it's primarily been, in our history, it's primarily been residential property, single family, multifamily. And so just a backdrop, so it's really 5 ways that we get property into the land bank. We can buy it just like anybody else. It can be donated. It can be surplus government conveyance, kind of ones I've talked about. It could be a tax foreclosure, tax deeded property, or it could be some other type of conveyance from a criminal matter where a partner is basically transferred in. So if you start thinking about all those different types of properties, oftentimes a commercial building might not necessarily come into our possession unless we have a pool of funding to actually go acquire it, or for some reason somebody walks away from it. And again, as these councilmember mentioned about the taxes, a lot of those commercial buildings that go for tax sale, those are acquired by pretty well-heeled investors. And so we don't oftentimes see those. But assuming we did have that, the typically way we dispose of property is via an application, which would be a specific set of criteria. We'll do requests for proposals or qualifications, and in those we'll lay out the requirements. And we typically are seeking, in any instance, do you have experience? Do you have capacity? Can you deliver within a certain time frame? And do you meet whatever the goals are, either affordability or some type of rent advantage situation? That would be part of it. So we typically don't have one-off, knock on the door, hey, do you have a property? It's typically more of an orderly deal. All of our inventory is online. So if you go to our website and click on inventory, it's a GIS-based listing of all the inventory that I talked about. You can see it. So if anybody, so we ever in the future have buildings, you'll be able to see them. But right now, we don't have any. It's a common question, but we just don't have buildings.
Okay, so you do have residential properties.
We have residential properties. That is correct.
Okay, so how can I obtain a list? You're saying that's online.
All that's online. And so what will happen if you go online and you click on a property that you're interested in, if it is available. Now, bear in mind that some properties are not available even though we own them. And what does that mean? If we're holding it for another party, they're the ones that are going to dispose of it, not us. So all those properties for Invest Atlanta, for West Side Future Fund, Police Foundation, they have their own process. We're just holding it. For ours, the application will then populate and say, complete the application. As it stands right now, actually, we don't have any surplus property available right now. That's why the properties we will have available for putting back out into use will be these new sheriff and marshal deeds and these demolition lien properties. So everything else you see right now, most of it's actually already obligated. So we need to acquire more property, and that's what we're working on now, is actually refilling the portfolio.
Okay, can you send me a list of the property that's available?
Yeah, we can do it. We'll extract it, do an export, and send it to your office.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Any